you.
Thanks. Yeah, the digital entropy of death. Oh, I'm getting a round of applause now. I'm done anything. Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, so it used to be the case that when, you know, your friends, your family, relatives, whatever died, you get all these heirlooms and bits and pieces and boxes full of stuff. But now you're being left all these bits and pieces of digital data. They're leaving comments on websites. They've got their blogs. They've got online accounts that you may not know about. And, you know, people continue to die using these services. I think something like 30 million people on Facebook have died around 2012. That's like 8 years since the thing was set up. And current estimates, if you assume that Facebook continues to grow the way it will, we're going to end up at some point 2050-ish, 2060, with more dead users registered on the site than alive. And that's going to continue to be the case for all of these websites and portals we keep using. And it got me thinking, well, you know, how secure are these accounts? How locked down are these accounts? What happens to the accounts of our dead relatives and friends, you know, once they've passed on? Are they secure? Are they going to get used for dodgy dealings and antics? What can we do to re-secure these accounts if they're not already? What can we do to take control and ownership of them before somebody else does? And, you know, this is a big problem. This has been a problem for a number of years now. You know, you've only got to have a quick dig through the headlines. A lot of these are Facebook centric. There are people getting friend requests from people that have died. Dead relatives accounts are being used for all sorts of scams online. There's account cloning where someone hijacks the account and they will, you know, populate it with information from somebody else and go off scamming. And, you know, if it's not that, it's things like Facebook reminding you of, you know, here's this thing you did in 2013 and it's, you know, a dead relative and you don't really want to think about it. You don't want to see it in front of you on the screen. And it's a big problem. And, you know, the big worry is, for a lot of people, is that you're going to post something stupid on Twitter like I bought 10 bananas and then you're immediately going to walk off and be hit by a bus. And that's, as far as everybody out there is concerned, the last thing you did online was tell everybody you went out and bought 10 bananas, which is kind of embarrassing. But then not only that, someone's going to pop up and say, lol, you're dead, which, you know, it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of terrible. If you go and look at accounts of people who've recently died in an accident, whatever, natural causes, there will always be someone who will pop up and say something like that at the bottom. And, you know, we can laugh, but it's not very pleasant for the friends and family. There's not a lot you can do to remove these comments from you know, these social networks. And, you know, we're in a weird place where we often think about people's Twitter feeds as, you know, they're sort of weird digital last will and testament. You know, we always race to see their Twitter feed and what they posted. And people will not only go and see what the last thing they posted, they will filter it to, you know, the replies tab and see what the last thing they said specifically to someone else was. It doesn't matter how, you know, how irrelevant it is to your day-to-day existence. We want to know what they said. And this isn't a screenshot from Twitter. This is a screenshot from a website that collects the last tweet that somebody posted before they died, whether it was natural causes, an accident, to the extent that they will also list the time of the last tweet, the time of the death, and they will even mention, you know, the manner of their passing. So the guy in the middle is a cardiac arrest with a link to the bio. The guy at the top was a car bomb. The one at the bottom was a helicopter crash. And it's really quite weird and ghoulish, but people are fascinated by this. And, you know, it's got to the extent that I'm starting to think that the technology has sort of really passed us by. We're not really aware how deeply embedded a lot of this tech is into, you know, our afterlives. I mean, hands up how many people knew you can get QR codes on gravestones. We've got a couple. I'm surprised we've got a couple. You can go to these companies. You can pay for a specially designed, very ornate QR code, which goes on the gravestone. It will be tied to a website all about the dead relative. You can go along for a nice family day out, fire up your laptop, connect to the Wi-Fi that's built into the headstone, and then you can bring up the website. You can bring up facts and figures, information about their lives, photographs. You know, if they wrote a song, that'll be on there. It might link through to a YouTube clip. It's kind of weird to me, but, you know, a lot of people are, you know, quite happy with that. But then you start thinking about whether these things are secure, if they're insecure, if the pages are HTTPS, if they're not, can they be, you know, messed with and tampered with? There's a great deal of potential for trolling with a lot of this technology. And in terms of the current state of play, you know, I might be being a bit obvious here, but it is incredibly traumatic for people when accounts have been tampered with for a deceased relative. A lot of the time I found that it's too hard for relatives to access these accounts and take ownership of them. But the flip side of this is it's very easy for attackers. You know, my friend or relative dies. I don't really know what to do about getting access to the account. I don't know who to contact. I don't know what the customer support is. I don't know if it's got two-factor authentication on it or if it's, you know, it's wide open. Someone who wants to hijack that account for something dubious couldn't care less. They're just going to go in and take the thing. And, you know, I found frequently that the law versus the tech is misaligned. A lot of the laws that have been written for, you know, everything from copyright to death and everything else, they're 18th or 19th century. They're not really relevant anymore. Whereas the tech companies, generally speaking, don't really know what to do in these situations when someone comes along and says, well, you know, my dad's died or my auntie's died. This account's been compromised. What can you do? So in terms of actual number crunching, what we've got is 150,000 people dying a day. We've got 55 million people roughly dying every year. And in the UK alone, we've got 500,000 per year dying. Now you think about how many of those people have, you know, some form of online account. Almost all of them probably are going to have at least one online account somewhere that is permanently orphaned at the moment of the death. So this is a lot of accounts that are just lying there for people to come along, try and compromise, and then make use of. There's been some surveys and stats and number crunching done on this. In 2012, Experian surveyed roughly 3,000 people, I think, and they found that most people that they surveyed had on average 26 accounts each, and they were sharing roughly 5 passwords between all of them. In 2015, Dashlane have got this inbox audit tool. They went through 23,000 of their customers anonymously and found, with, you know, all the emails coming in for logins and password resets and all the rest of it, UK residents had 118 accounts each, roughly. You know, they were asking for password resets and all the rest of it. I think US customers had 130. I've got nowhere near that many accounts. I don't know what people are doing, but it is very, very easy to rack up a huge amount of accounts. It's easy to hit double digits. So again, this is a lot of accounts lying around, a lot of insecurity lying around. And to tally up, you know, everything has got an expiration date on it. You know, cookies generally expire after 2 years. Websites have at the moment, people estimate that websites have an average lifespan of about 3 years before, you know, it's taken offline, it's rebuilt, whatever. Disruptive tech, has meant that a lot of the big companies in Silicon Valley and elsewhere have had their life expectancy shortened from around 60 years to 20 years. So, you know, people themselves have 70, 80 years roughly before they die. And all of these things are going down. All of these things are just permanently eroding. But the thing that isn't are your passwords. You know, we're always telling people to change the password every so often. And this is slowly becoming a thing of the past. People are starting to realize that the more you ask people to change their passwords, there's an element of insecurity introduced. So people just start, oh God, no, I don't want to change this anymore. I'm sick of changing it every 3 months, whatever it is. So they just start using really stupid passwords. All of a sudden, all of these corporate accounts are password 1, password 123, because they're sick of having to change them all the time. So everything else is expiring. Password longevity is going up. And of course, once you die, your password is effectively immortal till the service goes under or someone compromises it either by, data breach or some other method. So, in terms of rezzing, this is what people are calling the resurrection of these accounts belonging to dead people. There's 3 types. There's accidental rezzers, there's targeted rezzers, and there's non-targeted rezzers. And in terms of how these play out, I've got a few examples here. This is an accidental one. This is Roger Ebert, the film critic who died a couple of years back. His account was, he died, his account was completely dormant, and then all of a sudden in 2015, he randomly tweeted that this account is eating up all of his data, and he wants somebody to cancel it, please respond, which was a bit of a surprise, given that he was dead. So, predictable response, you're dead, right? No. That's extremely creepy. Yes, it is. What had actually happened here was his wife had access to his account, and she thought she was sending a direct message to someone in support, to sort out her data plan. And of course, this went online. She was completely confused as to why people were sending her late husband these messages. She made things even more confusing, and it just became an absolute mess. So, these are the kind of things that happen on a regular basis. This is an example of a targeted res. This is a really nasty troll. Unfortunately, this is someone that posted 1 hour till the movie, and it's going to be the best birthday ever. And this is on 20th of July 2012. And this, unfortunately, is an individual who went to see a showing of The Dark Knight, and then he was caught in the gunfire when someone turned up to the cinema showing with a gun and killed a whole bunch of people. And people will treat these last messages on Twitter as a sort of memorial. You can look at a post like this from someone every year, every so often on their birthdays, whatever, and people will, pass through and leave a comment, which is, is fair enough. So wind forward a couple of years of complete inactivity. 18th of March 2017, I'm alive. Someone had gone to all the time and trouble and effort of compromising this thing so they could post this troll. And this was pretty upsetting for the people on the receiving end. And that's still there now. That hasn't been removed. No one's done anything about it. Still there. And then you get these non-targeted attacks. These are very common on dormant Facebook accounts. So, this is from, when's this from? 3 years ago. My husband passed away 6 months ago. Tonight, many people receive friend requests from him. I don't have his password to log onto the account. What do I do? And this is the question that always comes up. What do I do? And nobody ever seems to know. Here's another one. This is from 4 years ago. Someone is posting pictures on my son's page, and he passed away months ago. We have tried reporting the page, and nothing is being done. You will find that this is very, very common. If you go onto the help portal on Facebook and you look through some of these messages, it's just endless amounts of people running into a brick wall trying to get something done about these compromises. Here's a final one. This is from 3 years ago. A deceased friend's profile has been hacked. The hacker has changed the name and changed the profile photo to one of me. None of the options on Facebook addresses this problem. Now, this is something that was very, very big a couple of years ago called cloning, where, they would hijack a dormant account, change all the information to someone that's, currently on the site using it, and then they would use it for social engineering. They would use it for, confidence scams, 419s, things like that. The old trick where you jump on Facebook and someone says, oh, I'm in this city, I'm on holiday, but I've lost my wallet, I've lost my passport, please, wire me some money. So that's generally what people do when they clone these accounts in this manner. And it's a big problem. Here's a non-targeted attack on Twitter. This is a famous journalist whose account, he'd been dead for a couple of years, and his account was compromised, changed into a porno spam bot. So of course, people who knew him very well, David Carr, were very, perturbed by this. And of course, it's not just the Twitter feed that's compromised usually. It's a whole range of accounts behind the scene that are compromised first, and then it spirals outwards. So here's one of his contacts, incredibly upset that of course they're suddenly receiving emails from David Carr. And I've dealt with people who've been affected by problems like this and tried to help them. And it's an incredibly traumatic experience. And a lot of this comes down to our digital assets and deficits, because it's not just these web accounts that you have. It's everything that you have. In terms of last wills and testaments, a lot of people don't really know what they are. A lot of people don't really think about it till it's too late. And, the last will and testament is all about your finances, the stuff that you own. What are you going to do with it when you pass on? Generally speaking, most people don't include any of the digital stuff in their last wills and testaments because they don't know how to. They don't know if it'll be valid. They don't know how to make the law interact with a company and so on. And you have living wills, which are similar, but they're designed to deal with your fate in the eventuality that you're maybe incapacitated or you're unable to interact with the everyday world anymore. So it's more about healthcare. and what to do with you while you're in, potentially a vegetative state. And again, people will occasionally try and include things of a digital nature in these, but 9 times out of 10, they just won't, because, why would they? And you have living trusts, which are similar to the other two. They sort of deal with you at every stage of your life. So, when you're healthy, when you're not so healthy, and then when you're dead, and someone will be apportioned as the trustee for one of these living trusts, and they will, micromanage the finances and everything else. And, again, these things don't generally tend to include digital assets. And when I think of my own digital assets, I'm always reminded of my console collection. I've got loads of old Dreamcasts, loads of old games consoles, Neo Geos, TurboGrafx, you name it, I've got them. And then I've got a whole bunch of old computers, Commodore 64s, Plus 4s, Amstrads. And I often think about this because, the moment the hardware is obsolete, the games on these platforms are rendered obsolete as well. That's why so many people are fans of emulators and downloading ROMs, because, once the hardware is gone, the games are gone completely. And it made me think about, the digital games that I own, or I think I own now, rather than these hardware boxes, which I can still, bring back to life. I've got a Steam account. I spend stupid amounts of money in the sales when they have the sale. And, you buy a whole bunch of games and you play maybe one of them, and that's it. And you end up with hundreds and hundreds of these games. You spend an awful lot of money on them, and you can plug your Steam data into various services online and find out how much, your digital assets for this gaming account are worth. And in my case, it's stupid. It's $10,000. I know it's not really worth $10,000, and I know that in real terms, all I've actually done is buy a bunch of licenses to access these games. And then at some point, I'm not going to have this license to access these games anymore. But, you think, well, that's an awful lot of money you've put into this. Do I keep ownership of this when I die? Can I pass it on to somebody? Will the account still be secure? It's secured at the moment. It's 2-factored. What happens after I die? Can I give this to somebody? So, you go and look at the wonderfully long terms and conditions, the user agreements, for my Steam account, for example, doesn't get off to a good start. You may not reveal, share, or otherwise allow others to use your password or account, except as otherwise specifically authorized by Valve. So that's not very promising. I don't think I'm going to be able to hand this on to somebody just yet. Maybe somewhere else in there that there's a way around this. Nope. Your account is strictly personal. You may therefore not sell or charge others for the right to use it, or otherwise transfer your account, or as otherwise specifically permitted by Valve. I'm just going to give up, because basically they are not going to let me give this to anybody. And, if you think about it, outside of the shift to streaming services, you don't buy CDs anymore. You stream stuff on the latest streaming platform. You don't buy films anymore. You just pay a subscription fee to Netflix or whatever. And you sort of temporarily have access to it till you stop paying, and then it's gone forever. Stuff like this, where you pay for the license and you kind of own it in a weird grey area for a while, and then you don't. These are going to go the way of the dinosaur, basically, because at some point, an account like this ends up being any number of digital deficits that are tied to your bank balance. And then you've got the spouse sitting there. They probably don't realize that you might have monthly billing on this thing or that thing, that you got fees going out maybe for an eBay shop that you didn't tell them about. So, you end up in debt. You end up with all of this digital content that's no longer your own, and it's gone. And, these companies are eventually going to come up with a way to stop you from passing these accounts on. If I wanted to pass on, my Steam account to my son or my daughter or whatever in a bunch of years, at some point Steam are going to wonder in 50, 60, 70 years why I'm still playing these games, why this account is still active. And I predict that they're going to start placing countdown timers on any account where, you acquire a license to access content. It's possible that they'll work it out by estimated human lifespan in this country or that country. It's possible that they may well make use of, web analytics. It used to be the case that you'd block ads or you'd block trackers. So, you'd bypass all of those stupid ads on the web pages that you browse. where they say, hey, were you born between this year and that year? You could have a claim for this thing, or, you could win money for that thing. And those were annoying, but it's going to be even more annoying when people use those kinds of analytics to establish, roughly how old you are, which demographic you fit into when you purchased your Steam account or that account. And then, they send you an email to let you know that this thing's going to have a digital self-destruct applied. So it doesn't matter how you hand over your password or who you give it to. It's going to go, the same way you're going to go. And all of this digital content that you thought you owned at least is gone. And I think this method of ownership, is going to go the way of the dinosaur. I think everything's going to move on over to streaming, because if you think about it, it's ideal for these companies' legal teams. They don't have to worry about, do we have to legally give them this stuff anymore? Because, you never owned it in the first place. So, loads of people end up coming up with really gonzo DIY approaches to reclaiming ownership of this content. I mean, I ran into this a couple of years back, with a relative who was, not long for this world, unfortunately. And they had a whole bunch of online accounts. Some of them were secure, some of them weren't. Some of them reused passwords, some of them didn't. One of them used a YubiKey, I think, for some reason, but everything else was a mess. And you sit down and you try and work out how you're going to work out which accounts are theirs, which ones are important, which might have important things in them. And, the legal terms and conditions never really match up to the last will and testament or everything else. So you think about how many accounts you've got. You've got your social media profiles. You've got, maybe 5 or 6, 7 of those. You've got your Google and Yahoo services, which plug into, email, Flickr, all sorts of services. They've probably got an Outlook and a Hotmail. They may be registered on a couple of forums. They may have some video game accounts, and then if you've got a video game account, it's probable that you've got multiple accounts orbiting those. So, if you've got a Steam account, you've bought a bunch of games, a lot of real-time strategy games will insist that you go off and register something else on their own website, or you've got to register on their forum to unlock this content and that content. So, one login becomes 3, 4, 5, 6 logins just for one specific game. So how do you untangle that? They've got work mail, they've got work surfaces tied to that work mail. They're going to have a LinkedIn, GitHub, Trello, everything else. And then there's going to be complications around those, accessing those, finding important things in there that you may need access to. What if you needed an online-only P60 for something, and it's locked down deep in their work mail somewhere? Do you approach HR? Do you just discreetly try and grab the password, which is probably a bad idea? People don't know. There is no clear path to resolving these problems. So people will do things like fire up LastPass, and they'll just use something as basic as the shared password option. So you can go into LastPass, you can fire up the shared password option, and you can specify the recipient's email address, and you can choose to keep the password hidden or not. It wouldn't really make much sense to keep it hidden in this case, where you actually want the password. And you can give them access one by one to some of your online accounts. Another way of doing it, if they've got loads and loads of accounts, you can share them in batches. This has been moved over to a feature in LastPass called LastPass Families. So you can go out and check out LastPass Families. And it's actually kind of addressing some of these issues. It's designed so that, I think 4 or 5 family members all have access to these shared logins. There's an emergency procedure if one of the family members on there dies. It's one of the few that I've seen, actually. And it's quite interesting that there's a lot of services that have been online over the last maybe 5-10 years that started off as these sort of digital locker sites where you could place all your cherished memories and logins and this thing and that thing into these storage sites, and they would promise never to go down, and they would disseminate the data when they'd been notified that the person had died. A lot of these sites have actually sort of turned into password management systems, which is quite interesting. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 that have done that in the last 3 or 4 years. And people laugh at these things, these password books where you write down your username and your password in the book. And, we all have a good chuckle at it because it's not very secure. But for something like this, it's actually ideal, especially if the the person that you're trying to save all this data for knows the way around the web, but has no idea about the security stuff. They stick their passwords, their usernames, they update them in the book, hopefully, when they change them, and they write the password down correctly, hopefully, when they're jotting these things down in the books. And, you know, people will scoff at these things and say, well, it's not very secure, is it? But if the thing is stored in their house, either in a drawer or a safe, and, you know, someone has broken into their house and at 2 a.m. and they're running around looking for things to steal, you've got more important things to worry about than someone nicking your password book, frankly. So in our specific situation, we ended up using a combination of very, very basic LastPass sendovers and one of these password books. And, you know, when they died, we went through the password book. Everything was correct. All the passwords were correct. They'd updated all of the information correctly. I think out of about 35 logins, only 2 of them were broken. So, you know, it worked. Everyone was happy, and, you know, people could do what they needed to do, in the, you know, the aftermath of their death. And in terms of companies dealing with death, a lot of the major players have actually stepped up. There's a surprising amount of services you can pull from some of the big players, in the absence of, you know, the law being able to fully integrate properly with people's last wishes with regards to their digital accounts. So Twitter, for example, you can go onto their privacy policy page. For some reason, it's buried in a bunch of drop downs on the privacy policy section. And you can request Twitter account information. You can report an underage person's account, or you can request the deactivation of a deceased or incapacitated person's account, through Twitter. So you go in, you fill in some information, you say which account it is, the full name, you tell them whether you're related to the person that's died, if you're a legal guardian or a family member. They do say that they're unable to provide access to the login details. So if you don't already have the login details, you're never going to be able to use the account. It's basically deactivated forever and will just sit there. Obviously in the, Roger Ebert film critic case, his wife already had the login. So, it still makes some sense if the account is particularly important, to, you know, pass the logins on, because they will not give them to you after they've died. Google have a huge amount of services for this. The slightly unexcitingly named Inactive Account Manager, lets you make a plan for all of your digital data that's in Google. So, you know, everything from the emails to the, you know, maps, Blogger, everything that they offer, it is all in there. So, you can decide when Google, should consider your account inactive. So, in a nutshell, the way this works is, you give them a specified time. So, if you haven't logged in for, say, 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months, they correlate all the information from logins, sign-ons on your phone, locational data, things like that, and work out if, you know, you're actually still using the service or not. And at that point, you can choose who to notify, what you want to share with those people, and decide if you want the inactive account to be deleted. And they, you know, they really give you some functionality here. You can choose up to 10 people to notify. So if you go AWOL, you can notify up to 10 people. You can give them access to the bits of data that you want to give them access to. And you can even set up an after death auto reply. So, which is a bit weird, but it works. You know, it works. In addition to all the people that you've let know, the close, you know, group of up to 10 people, anyone that emails you after that point, as long as you didn't deactivate the thing, will at least know what's happened. So, you know, you have autoresponders in the afterlife. Facebook, they have a very straightforward process. I think they've done this since about 2012, 2013. So you can report a deceased person, or you can have them memorialized, which is where, you know, you effectively take ownership of the page. You can't post any new content to it, but you can perform admin tasks and clean up spam or prevent people posting and all that kind of thing. Even LinkedIn has a similar service to this, believe it or not. You can actually go on LinkedIn and let them know if one of, you know, your professional colleagues on LinkedIn has passed away, and they will go off and do a similar process to this. So, you know, if they're medically incapacitated or they're dead, you can let them know. If you want to report a hacked account, you have to do something else. You have to go and fill out a separate form. So that's possibly where people were running into some problems with the account cloning from those earlier screenshots. So see here, it's all very straightforward. It's all very simple. You can tell them to memorialize it, remove it because they're incapacitated, and you can give them a special request. So if you have a very, very specific request outside of the, the little checkboxes, because that might come up in some situations, you can ask for it. Most of the other big platforms that offer these kind of services don't do that. So, they get a thumbs up for that one. And in terms of link rot, it's not just the people using the web, it's the web itself. We've got this idea on our heads that, everything you stick online is permanent. It's all there forever, don't stick this thing on that website because you'll never get rid of it. But really, the web itself is as wonky as anything else. This is a site called Death Switch, and this was one of those services where, if you don't log into this email service for a certain amount of time, they will mail blast your contacts, telling them that, you're dead, this account's now inactive. And, a lot of these services will say, we're here forever, we're never going to go away. Unfortunately, Death Switch is dead. They are no more, unfortunately. So I hope nobody was signed up to that one because it's not going to help. And this got me thinking about some of my own websites because, I write a lot of blogs. I write hundreds of blogs a year. I've picked up a lot of press coverage for some of the research and some of the finds that I've made. So, it's good practice to collect these links, to write them down because, it's useful for future job opportunities. It's very useful for reference, and security moves so quickly that you have to write these things down because you can barely remember what happened 6 months ago, never mind in, 2008, 2007, whatever. So it got me thinking, a lot of these are links to major news services. They're major web platforms. In theory, all of these links should still be there, in theory. So I went through all of these links and had a look. Unfortunately, things didn't turn out as planned. A lot of these pages were broken. They didn't work. They went to the wrong thing. And in one case, one of my security finds went to an article about the HP touchpad needing 6 to 8 weeks for additional shipments, but under the same URL it had originally, which was faintly distressing, but never mind. So I went through all of these links. This isn't a scientific survey by any means. This is literally just me looking at all of the URLs on this webpage from 2004 to 2010. So you can see the total links for each year in blue, the links that were either broken or went to a dead URL or redirected somewhere else in orange. And by and large, it's almost 50-50 for the most part. Any of those given years, 8 links in 2005, 4 were broken. 19 in 2006, 10 were broken. 26 links in 2008, 13 were broken. Interestingly, the only site on any of those that consistently had all of the links where they should be was the Register. The Register just doesn't seem to purge links or content, whereas a lot of the other major news providers, either they've run out of server space or something, or they're running out of URLs. I don't know, but they just trash whole bunches of news articles, and it's kind of weird because a lot of these stories and things don't exist anywhere else because the blogs that they were written on have long since gone. If these things were written on a corporate or a company blog, the blog has probably gone offline or been discontinued, or the company's been bought out, or they changed the URLs. Like one of these blogs has still got my articles on it, but they changed the URLs about 2 or 3 times, and they removed, all of the names, like my name on the account that posted them, and they just plonked them all under a default admin account. So, even when some of your work is still there, there's bits of it just falling off all the time. And out of 163 URLs, 91 of them worked, 72 of them didn't. And, if you do this, if you sit down, if you pick up a collection of your web links, wherever else, just going back maybe 2 or 3 years, you'll be amazed how many of these things are already inactive. And, link shorteners, there's a lot of link shorteners out there which again, auto-destruct the link. So this is URL gone, and they give you a URL. You can specify how long you want this shortener redirect to last for, And then after the specified amount of days, it goes bang. And a lot of people don't understand what that means in practice, or they just don't care. And these links that are really supposed to be for private use only end up out there on the web. So you end up with all of these links that are broken, all of these redirects that go nowhere, to the extent that you have to go to Internet Archive and check out 301works.org, which is this sort of volunteer task force that's been set up between all of these URL shortener companies. So on a daily or annual basis, they will pass over dumps of all of their redirect links into this pot, if you like. So if one of the services that's taking part in this ever goes down, ever breaks, ever goes offline, all of their URLs, the redirector URLs, will still work, because 301 will take ownership and control of them and ensure that these redirectors still continue to work. Which, you know, is kind of wacky, really, when you think about it. It's so impermanent, and we just sort of trust that all of this stuff is going to be there and still work tomorrow, and it very rarely does. And in terms of the treachery of images, you know, we have a lot of, image check and other types of tiny pick and sites like that, where people will just throw up the image, and people were finding that they were going back on old posts, they were looking, and a lot of these images had not only expired, but they reused the links. Like a lot of URL shortener services claim that they will never put the URLs back into the pool, because obviously if they do, you're going to end up on a site that you didn't expect to, and that would be great for, you know, scammers, malware authors. So generally, even the fly-by-night URL redirect services won't put the URLs back into the pool, but that's not the case with images. So this guy had a bunch of pictures, cat pictures on a cat picture thread. All the pictures had expired, and you know, the URLs have been reused. So instead of cat pictures, he had command interface commands for online games. He had someone's very fetching selfie. He had a scenario involving Bob making up his story day to day. He also had his girlfriend replaced by a picture of a horse, and an air conditioning unit took the place of his 3 friends from college. So, yeah, these are really weird things. These are really weird shifting sands that we just don't really think about. And, you know, there's even a weird sort of money-making piranha-style industry that's built up around the link rot ecosystem. So for the last year and a half, 2 years, our company and many companies that, you know, we speak to, other security bloggers that we know, you know, you stick a blog online, you know that eventually some of the links in your blogs are not going to be there anymore. But you don't go back to a blog from, you know, if you write hundreds of blogs in a year, you don't go back checking these things every 5 minutes, because there's no point. Some of them are going to go. So we find that we're getting these emails now from people where they're saying, you know, I sent you a couple of emails. I wonder if there's someone I can get in touch with to get this broken link fixed. So they will trawl through your blog. Some of it's manual, some of it's automated. They will fish out the broken links, the redirectors, and then they will try and boost their own page rank by offering up their spam blog as a replacement for the link that you had on there. And a lot of people will say, you know, don't use Wikipedia for a link, or, you know, for information purposes when you talk about a subject and link to a subject. But to be perfectly honest, at least you have a reasonable degree of certainty that the Wikipedia page will be there. It might have been, you know, defaced and messed with, but it will be there in some form. Whereas these, you know, everybody's company pages, the websites, a lot of them go bang. And it's not just people asking to get their page rank up. People will try and charge you for the privilege of this as well. So here's one we had. Blah, blah, blah. We will work to optimize your SEO page rank. We have sites of our own you can change the links to. Contact to discuss a possible business plan and introductory discount. So these guys want me to pay them for them to send me their spam blog and boost their page rank from my website, which has a better page rank than theirs. And they're going to charge me a couple of $100 for this hot mess. And this is a very, very popular thing now. Does anyone run a blog and had any of these? Anything similar? Well, we've got one. Brilliant. Thank you. See, I wasn't making it up. So we, this is a thing. And there's a number of different variations on this. And we've had a few of these that will come through and start off like this. And then they will work their way over to a sort of social engineering attempt or a phish, or something along those lines. So it's quite a weird one. The instability of bits and pieces of the web are generating actual business opportunities for scammers. And in terms of, the end of the line, it really isn't. There's a huge amount of tech out there that's devoted to, your digital afterlife, if you like. AI chatbots are enormously popular. Has anyone heard of Roman Mazurenko? Anyone? Okay, so this is a guy who was a very well-known startup guy. He moved to the States, and he had a whole bunch of businesses that he was putting together, mainly around computers, tech, AI. And he was killed in a hit and run. I think he was hit by a car and died. And his friends who'd set up similar businesses to him and moved to the States and were obviously devastated. They'd made this sort of AI tool that would it was designed to look at language used in restaurants and assist with orders in different languages in restaurants. So they thought, well, maybe we can do something with this. So a whole bunch of them plugged this AI into all of his Telegram messages, his chats, his texts, emails, you name it. They were all jammed into this thing. And they made some additional tweaks to see if they could basically replicate this guy. And in a really weird sort of way, they did. You can actually download Roman, as an app on the iPhone. It's not on Android, but it's on iPhone. And if you just search for his name, you'll see the app come up. You can download it. You can find about his life, his work. And the people who knew him, have a very mixed response to this app. Half of them loved it, and it's like they're still talking to this guy from beyond the grave. Half of them were a bit uncomfortable with it, didn't really like it. His family had a mixed response to it. And it's weird, people can't really figure out at the moment if these are actually helping with the grieving process, or, it's a sort of weird digital crutch that we really need to throw away and, make peace with the fact that they're gone. And all the time in the back of your mind, you're thinking, how secure are these apps? How secure are these platforms? Can people mess with them? Can people tamper with them? You've got mind files and mind clones. Mind files are basically these huge data dumps where, similar to Roman's chatbot, you dump all of this information about yourself, your life, as much as possible, and these neural networks piece it all together and try and replicate the person to a satisfactory degree. And the mind clones are these sort of animatronic replicants of you, with all of these memories and things dumped into the mind file. And, you can go online, you can look at video footage of people talking to these things, effectively talking to themselves. And I've got to admit, they're not very convincing. They don't look very realistic. They're kind of a bit scary, some of them. And you kind of get the impression that the person talking to this thing isn't really convinced. But they do surprise, and they do sort of replicate these people to an astonishing degree in certain situations. And again, you have to wonder about the tech. You have to wonder how secure they are. Similar tools to these that I've seen are often Internet of Things style. They're web connected, or they're, we all know about IoT devices. A lot of them just aren't that secure. And it would be quite bad if someone got their hands on one of these things and tampered with it in, really bad ways. And, VR, I know a lot of game developers, I know a lot of VR developers who are working with similar types of tech combined, the AI chatbots, the so-called mind files, and they're looking to try and jam, photographically precise replicants of these people that have died into these VR headsets, give you a nice, serene location to go and hang out with them at, or, a nightclub, whatever they like to do. And a lot of this is limited at the moment by the hardware. There's a lot of things that VR headsets can't really do very well. The HTC Vive, they recently brought out a replacement for the old unit that's got a better magnification and all the rest of it. But if you look at it for a while in a sort of game, a very traditional game environment, the illusion persists. But the moment you get dropped into something that isn't just film, high definition film footage that you can look around in, and you try to interact with it, the illusion very quickly falls away. So those are the kinds of things that people I know are working on at the moment. And again, I've done talks on VR insecurity and the way that you can tamper with VR, you can mess with the optics in front of people, you can mess with the game space. So again, it does lead to some weird questions about how secure are these things going to be. It's going to be incredibly traumatic if you throw on the headset and then, your deceased auntie tries to sell you a timeshare in like Beta or somewhere, So that is basically where we're up to with regards, how death currently functions with the online world and how it bleeds back into the real world and how, these wills and testaments, these local laws, these outdated ways of doing things really don't mesh with the technology that we use on a daily basis. And, some of the efforts that the bigger platform providers are trying to make and, the legal absence of process really. So that is the end of my talk. I'm quite happy to field any questions on it if you've got them. Thank you.
Give it up for Chris Boyd. Does anyone have any questions for Chris? No? Oh, sorry.
Got a few.
Great talk as usual, Chris. At the beginning you said that it's often a lot easier for scammers to take over accounts for their own nefarious purposes than it is for, grieving family members to do the same. So can you talk a little bit more about that? How you think scammers do take over accounts of deceased people?
Yeah, I mean, the big problem with it really is the fact that the family member has no real idea what to do. I mean, if I die, my family members, only for the fact that I, have told them what to do and, we've made provisions for stuff like this, you're not really going to know who to approach. You're going to go to the Facebook page. You're going to go to the customer support bit. You're not really going to know where to look. You're probably not going to know to go to the bit on privacy policies on Twitter to find where you kickstart the process to recover somebody's account. So really, the problem for the family is it's a mess of links, of hidden pages, of not being able to see this information, clearly and accurately, tell them what to do. Once you get to the bit on the website about the deceased relative, it's fine, it tells you what to do, what to click on, how to do it, and, you can even make your special request on Facebook. But actually getting to that point is a nightmare for a lot of people, especially if, the relatives just died, and, the last thing they're going to be doing is thinking about someone's Facebook page, whereas the scammer, they don't really, a lot of the time, care about the status of the deceased person's account. They don't care if they're using it, if they're dead, if they're alive. If they find it in a data dump, they're going to use it and, clone someone to scam with it. If, if a platform has a breach and all of the passwords are leaked, they're going to use it regardless of whether they're alive or dead. We have seen instances where someone will target specific families on social media platforms and social engineer relatives. If there was an account that they really specifically wanted to get into, they will use the tried and tested approaches. They will social engineer. They will pretend to be somebody. They might pretend to be someone from the platform helping them with their dead relative. We've seen that one once or twice. And so the way they break into these things is fairly undramatic and about the kind of way that you'd expect. But for the family, it's just the red tape and the where do I go next.
Just in the last 2 weeks, I was aware of a friend of mine whose father had become incapacitated. He wasn't dead, but was incapacitated, and he wasn't able to remember any of the passwords for accessing his account. And he'd been quite secure in setting up his accounts, and his daughter is reasonably digitally literate, kind of in the area, and had found it incredibly difficult to Facebook and all of these, they couldn't get in.
Yeah, this is the problem. You make these things secure because you don't want people to steal them, and then you fall ill and you can't remember any of the logins and you didn't think to pass them on to anybody, and all of a sudden everybody's locked out from the thing. So in some weird ways, it kind of helps for the incapacitated or deaf scenario when somebody's accounts are really insecure. They have actually gone and used password 123 on all 118 of their accounts, because it means it's then a race to see who can get in first, you or the scammer. But
Trying to get in touch, because he had doctors who tried to email him and he couldn't access his email because his phone was locked down and he couldn't get access to his email to get into his email to read his appointments for going to see the doctors and specialists and stuff like that. So yeah, it was absolutely.
yeah, it would never cross your mind until you're actually faced with it. And then all of a sudden, is this two-factor? Is it? Am I using a little YubiKey thing, or is it a phone? Is it SMS? Have they changed networks, or is it Google Authenticator? How on earth do I get into this account? And again, then you run into that. Yeah, even just accessing the phone.
And then they bricked it because they tried so many passwords, so they couldn't get into text messages.
Yeah, it's a common and horrible problem, unfortunately.
Any more questions for Chris?
Thanks. This is a really, really interesting topic, and one of the things that I find interesting is how far the law is actually behind on this sort of stuff. Do you think that we will see over in the next 5-10 years the law actually catching up to be able to support people better? Because at the moment it seems to be companies themselves that are making forefront, but there are going to become times when somebody will challenge the right that my kids should inherit my Steam account or my PSN account or anything like that. Do you think law is going to catch up?
It's hard to say. There are some very, very specific laws in and around this area in the States. There was one that now I'm not an expert on US legal stuff at all, so I'm not going to attempt to explain it or even pretend that I understand it, because I was reading through this for a long time and I just gave up. But there are some very specific things in some very certain states in the US that deal with this sort of problem, and make it easier to facilitate the transfer of certain specific online accounts into the official last will and testament, rather than trying to bodge job it and guess this password and hack into this phone and steal this thing and find out if they wrote it down on a piece of paper somewhere. But I mean, as far as the UK goes, I think it will be a long time before the law catches. I mean, look at copyright law and DRM and things like that. It's a complete mess. But it's only 10 years or so since. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have even been able to get this kind of assistance with Google or Facebook or anyone else, because these things did not exist. I think I said earlier the Facebook service came in about 2013, I think it was. I think Google's was roughly around the same time, might have been a year or two earlier. Even LinkedIn's got something similar, and a lot of websites do have this functionality, or at least will allow you to inquire about the possibility of handing something over. But because the way the law is versus, your actual requirements and needs for these accounts, it's on a, as you do it basis, really, until you actually ask the company what provisions they have. You might get somewhere, you might get nowhere. It's a complete lottery, unfortunately.
Any more?
Hi. You talked about the LastPass families before and even using a password book. But what steps would you personally take to make it easier for your family on the event of your death? How would you advise somebody to take steps in making it easier for them? Is there anything you would say to do? Or
what would I do to make things easier for people? Okay, I mean, as we've seen in the example there, one of the biggest problems is these things become so secure that you can't, you've got no chance of getting in on the things. If all of these logins are on a two-factor app on someone's phone, but then the phone is locked down because, there's some biometric pass, or they've forgotten the PIN code, or, the process for unlocking the phone, via, a web portal or something similar doesn't really work very well. That generally tends to be the biggest headache. A lot of the time I've found that people can remember the passwords to some degree, or our old friend password reuse actually comes in handy. But the number one thing that I found when I dealt with this personally, and I know people who've dealt with this, and we've had one example here today already, it's the phones. It's the additional authentication that causes the biggest problem. So I would urge anyone to, make a point of talking about what devices they use in tandem with their logins and how to best, get into these devices should it be required.
Excellent. Well, if there's no more, give it up for Chris Boyd.